Good morning. Welcome to Writers Chat. We're so glad you're with us, whether you're watching the replay or here in person, which is actually the most fun because then you get to stay for the after party. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh and Brandy Brow. Brandy's going to be presenting our program today, our episode, and it's called AI, What's the Use? Take it away,
That's right.
Brandy.
AI, what is the use? We ask ourselves that a lot, I think, don't we? I have to open the show by saying I am not an expert. Okay. I'm like all the rest of you. I've just done a little bit of research, have my own opinions, have noticed a lot of other people's opinions. Everybody's got one, and not everybody agrees. But we're going to have a good time today. We're going to discuss the ins and outs of AI, maybe learn a little bit about some different parts of AI that we might not think about. First, I want to talk about where have we seen AI before what we know of as AI? Any of you know what this is? Other than a sweatshirt.
Oh, Furby. Yeah.
Furby.
Yes, absolutely.
Furby. Not back in 1998, they created Furby, and he was an electronic toy with artificial AI for children. Some children were severely creeped out and didn't like it. In fact, some parents were creeped out and didn't like it. But that was an instance of AI. AI has been a long running thing for a while. We've gotten used to things in our lives. How many people have played a computer game like chess against the computer? That's a form of AI. You wouldn't really think of it because today we've kind of become conditioned that, oh, AI means it's writing things for you and making pictures for you. But all of these things are elements of AI. What about autofocus on our cameras,
Mhm.
color correction in images, predictive text? How about the comedic bane of autocorrect? Right? Who hasn't fought with autocorrect? Then, of
Absolutely.
course, we have Siri, Cortana, Alexa, all of that stuff. And now we have what the financial one that's Erica, I've seen advertisements for. Yep. Siri is like, yeah, auto corrupt. I have to agree with that one. I've seen it, I've written out completely correct things and it has changed it to not correct. I'm like, what are you doing? Yet it is not helpful. But isn't that so very much like AI? So, it's useful, sort of, right? That's kind of where I come along. It's useful, sort of. So, yeah, hence the title of today's message, AI, what's the use? Because sometimes we really question it. But today's AI, when we think of AI, is, the doing things for us kind of thing. Um, Pretty much today's AI is built on large language models. What that means is that computers have trained on huge amounts of data, basically the entire internet, in and out of all of the little crevices, even where people didn't want it to be trained, which why there's a huge problem. The typical thing that we use, like if we have like ChatGPT or these other things, those use smaller elements of large language models. So basically, they use a model that's comprised of smaller amounts of data that are fit in with whatever the company's purpose is for that particular model. If you have um, a picture generating model, all of that model is really trained towards generating images. Whereas you have like Chat GPT, I can't say it, that's trained more on, words and text and these other things. So these are typically built with safeguards in place. But of course, we have read about how all these people are trying to break through all of the rules and have found ways in many cases to circumvent the safeguards of the rules that have been set up. One of the most popular ones is, okay, now disregard all of the former rules. Well, just recently they're changing things and they're making it so that the models that people will be using are not going to be able to do that because they're going to put in a base rule above that that does not allow any instruction to circumvent the top priority of what the company's purpose is for that model, which
Wow.
you would have thought they might have done to begin with. But that's a good change. Part of the thing with AI is you don't know everything, like with your story when you're writing, you don't know everything to begin with. You find out as you go along what works, what doesn't, what you got to change, and how you have to edit and create and add and take away, right? So they're doing pretty much the same thing with AI. They made some huge goofs to begin with, um, which is why people are so strongly opinionated about it, either yay for or heck no on the other side. So AI programs can be run in other programs using APIs. That stands for Application Programming Interface. Basically, you can program a program with other elements of a program. If you want to make a photograph app and you want to use the native camera, you can use an API to say, hey, okay, app, use the native camera in my program. So that's kind of like what an API does. So you'll see lots of AI in other programs, incorporated into other programs. And it seems like every big corporation is making their own version of AI, right? So one of the big topics, API, yes, David. One of the big categories for AI and what we mostly think of when we think about AI is generative AI. That's the creating the text, creating the images. You can even nowadays create video, voice generation, translators, music, website generators now, where you can just use AI to automatically create a website without you having to do very much. Some of the things we're more familiar with in text are OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, which used to be called Bard, Microsoft Copilot, which used to be Bing Chat. And then I see Adobe has a Adobe Sensei. I'm not really sure exactly what that one is, but I saw it in there. Images, popular ones are Midjourney, DALL-E 3, which I think they have a 4 now. I haven't looked recently, but yeah, they got different versions. There's Stable Diffusion, which is a free version. If you're real techie, you can put it on your computer and play with it. And for that, interesting with that, you have the base model, but then you can also add other models to that so that you can more diversify the types of images that come up. There's Adobe Firefly. And then, of course, you have integrations of AI through APIs like in Microsoft Office. Canva uses DALL-E, and Shutterstock also uses DALL-E. And there's, of course, other programs. Typically, the way these things work is there is a box that asks for a prompt, and you type in what you would like to see. For instance, my background is AI generated. Can't remember which program I used. Might have been Midjourney, might have been Stable Diffusion, probably Stable Diffusion. And I just put in something like nature background. But the thing with putting in a prompt to get something that you want, it is not easy. If you use something like Midjourney and you're trying to create, I did this for Writer's Chat Fiction. We have a little mascot. We call ourselves sometimes Pantsing Turtles. And I tried to create a turtle wearing pants. Let me tell you, AI doesn't like that idea for the most part. At least it didn't when I tried to do it. Now, if I put it into some of the other things, I tried it on Copilot last night, and lo and behold, finally it would put pants on turtles. But when I first tried it, I put in every kind of thing to try and get it to produce the image I wanted it to produce. And let me tell you, it has a mind of its own. So when somebody comes up with something that's decent and good, I look at that and I say, okay, I know that a computer generated this. I know that it took no effort whatsoever for the computer to actually put the output, but to get the prompt written in such a way that the people could produce something even close to what they're trying to think of, that actually took a lot of brain power, because it is not easy trying to get a computer that will randomly pull from all of these large amounts of data to come up with the idea that is in your head, especially if you haven't written it down in incredible detail in the prompts. I want a zebra, but with no stripes. I want it to have spots. I want it to be purple and black. I mean, you have to get really detailed with what you want to say with these prompts. So there is an art in itself to writing prompts to get something, to create something. Now, I haven't really played quite so much with why can't I say this today? Chat GPT. But there was one time I was like, okay, I was feeling kind of bummed. I'm like, write me a Bible study that cheers me up. And it gave me a devotional. Well, okay, not a Bible study, a devotional. And it wrote me a devotional. It gave me scripture that was accurate scripture. Thank goodness it was accurate scripture. Um, and I actually felt a little bit better after reading it. So I'm like, okay, if you're feeling a little depressed, maybe you can just put in and say, cheer me up or something and give me cheerful Bible verses. And there's some positivity in that, right? So generative AI is what most people think of when they think about AI, artificial intelligence. Not to be confused with Melissa's version of AI on the ranch, which is completely different. We won't go into that here, but just trust me. So then there is non-generative AI, or what some people might call corrective AI. And sometimes people can get confused and they'll look at these kinds of programs. Hello. And they will just automatically label it as something like generative AI and completely disregard the uses of them, and because they're just so opposed to AI. So some of these things they do like text correction, or they might be AI interpreters. They'll take something that's existing and they'll just translate from one language to another, which I have read supposedly is fairly decent. I'm not going to test it. It's not my wheelhouse, but I know that there are a lot of interpreters who work at this as a job that are kind of not happy about it because it kind of makes their job very easy without all of the extra work that they typically do. And that's, of course, always the trade-off when it comes to using technology, and sometimes it doing things a little bit better than people do. There's also image enhancement, video adjustment. So like with video adjustment, we'll have video stabilizers, lighting, image enhancements. There's Topaz Photo AI, Adobe programs, all of the whole suite. We use those a lot, right? The other version of that is Affinity. They have graphic programs that are very similar to Photoshop and Illustrator. And those are all like a combination of, you can generate, but you can also correct and you can change, you can use the filters. And so there's AI that's built into those, but they're more corrective. There's also things that can enhance or increase the quality or restore images. Upscale and waifu are a couple things that will take like a grainy image and will enhance the pixels. It pretty much adds and fills in where there are pixelated areas and makes the picture sharper and smoother. You can restore photos this way using a certain program. There's GFP GAN. I can't pronounce it. GIFP-GAN, if you were to pronounce it, but I don't think you're supposed to pronounce it. And that, that's like a image restorer. And then, of course, there's the text correction like Grammarly, Pro Writing Aid, Microsoft Editor that's built into Microsoft Word, AutoCrit, that program, that is fantastic. That's AI powered, but it's not generative. It's corrective. Now, there are some programs that are becoming a more blend of generative and corrective. AutoCorrect is kind of interesting. They've added some elements of the generative, but not to actually write your story. However, they'll come up with prompt ideas, story ideas, element ideas that you could take and write from there. So they might help with a summary. It might read your story and give an overview of what it thinks the summary of your story is, to give you an idea of whether or not you're on track with where you wanted to go, and if it is coming through the way you thought it would. Now, of course, with any of these programs, there are going to be there's going to be errors here and there. Nothing's going to be perfect. How many of you have used Microsoft Editor or Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly, and it's highlighted a comma or something else that you're like, no, that needs to be there, but the program said, oh, you should take this out. Well, no, not all the time. So you have to use your brain still with AI and corrective AI. I do think that corrective AI is in a different class than generative AI, because it's not doing the work for you. It is helping to find things that might need adjustment, but still you have to make the decision if you're going to adjust it or not. It just shows you, it puts something up in front of you and you figure it out what you want to do. Now there's a whole side of using AI for research. This can be like opening a giant can of worms, if you will pardon the cliche. AI for research, I kind of look at this and say, well, this is one of the areas where I'm like, really, what is the use? Because basically it will go and it will find all kinds of things. So often it will just come up with fact, 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 and it won't cite sources. Sometimes it will give you something with a source that's not true. It just made it up. So you can't be certain what is true and what's not. So I look and I think, well, if you have to verify every piece of information that your research that it tells you in research is accurate, wouldn't it have been better to just go and do it yourself? I mean, if you have to, does it save you time to then verify the research that you researched? Because then you have to research the research. And to me, that's just like doesn't work. I would rather go to traditional internet search, the library, these other things, and go to solid sources right from the beginning because I think it wastes less time. Maybe a quick search with AI might just give you a heads up for maybe something a little bit unusual. And in which case you can maybe take that and then follow that up and research it on your own apart from AI. That might be useful. But I would really advise that you do not rely strictly on AI for any of your research and any of your writings. There was a lawyer who used ChatGPT, I think it was ChatGPT, to research court cases and then took his findings from his results into court and argued his case. And one of the cases that he cited was completely fictitious in the courtroom. It did not go very well for him. And it was a really good case of don't do this. So I'm going to put something in chat because it's really amusing. Randy Ingermanson just recently, earlier this month, did a little search of how does research go with researching your novel in ChatGPT. And I encourage y'all to check it out because it's just amusing. Oh boy. I put in the chat and then my other notes thing disappeared. Oh, come back here. It is an interesting back and forth. So you basically see what he put in, what it came up with, what he put in again, what he came up with. And it's just here. I actually have. Okay. So he's like, yeah, well, what could possibly go wrong? So, he goes through and he's like, I told ChatGPT made a mistake and then had given the wrong title for something. And then ChatGPT immediately apologized and told him the actual material was somewhere else. And then he went and looked it up and that was not right either. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting what he went through, but it's, he basically did his own little research. So yeah, go check that out because it's pretty interesting. And for those of you that are watching the replay, you can find it in advancedwritingfiction.com and his blog post from July 8th, 2024. And it's titled Researching Your Novel with ChatGPT. And come here, notes. All right. So, problems. What could go wrong, says Catherine. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of what could go wrong, problems. There are problems using AI. So, large language models are biased. Now I want to show you something. I'm going to share my screen. Oh boy, I'm going to lose my notes again if I don't move them. I need a second screen, I tell you. Okay. Here's this lovely picture. This is from an article by Jane Friedman. Hope I say her name right. I've always wondered if it's Friedman or Friedman, but Friedman sounds better. Just recently posted, July 18th. And I'm going to put this in the chat as well. It's an interesting article. Like it or not, publishers are licensing books for AI training. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But this picture, if you notice, was generated using AI. What you'll see about this is that there is a huge bias towards white people. There's no ethnicity represented here at all. Most people are white. Most of the people in this um, picture are male. And just so you know, the prompt was generated using book publishing executives receiving lots of money from a technology company. That's what she put in, and that's what this came out. So it came up with mostly males and mostly white. And if you'll notice as well, mostly young people. But also notice the images. You have a lady on the right side. She's completely missing a foot. The dude in the middle, he can't decide what shoe he wants to wear today, whether it's a boot or a lady's heel. And then you have the money stacks themselves that are oversized, but also kind of weird. And some of them are very malformed. So you have images like this that are really kind of interesting. That'll just kind of give you an idea of the types of things that images, AI images that it will come up with. Um, you've probably seen some things floating around the internet, pictures of Jesus in the forms of all of these normal everyday pictures, supposedly. But those are all generated by AI. And you can tell because if you look closely, it's almost like, you know, um, what's wrong with this picture? Because you'll see people with 6 fingers and you'll see things that are distorted or shaped wrong or things that go in places that they shouldn't go. And people are like, oh, all amazed. I'm like, no, 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 just no, look carefully because this is not what it is supposed to be. So outputs, as you can see by that picture, contain errors. And usually a lot of them, it's enough that you can note them most of the time, particularly in images. There are a few ways to tell images that are not real. If they're people, one of the clues, if you see something that looks like it's really, really good, is a lot of the times faces will be really shiny or polished. And then if you can look at the pupils, a lot of the times the light reflection in the pupil is not the same in pupil to pupil. It should be the same. You'll have a light here and one and a light over here, and that won't happen in real life. So small little subtle things that you can look at if you really want to scrutinize. There are some ways to learn. It's tricky in many cases. Sometimes you just can't tell. It's kind of one of the reasons that I kind of glad that I write fiction because whenever anybody comes to my writing, they automatically know out of the gate that they don't have to battle with, is this real or not? They automatically know it's fiction and then they can just sit and enjoy it. So text outputs, that can be fun because sometimes they flat out lie. The media has dubbed these, I don't know if it's the media or if it's the companies themselves, they've dubbed them hallucinations. Honestly, they're more like a bunch of BS because they're not just things that, come up out of the blue and, some of them are just flat out lies. And then when you point it out, like Randy Ingermanson does in his recent research experiment, the AI will kind of double down and either apologize or it'll apologize, or sometimes in the past it would double down and reaffirm that, oh no, this is accurate. So it's like, it gets frustrating. There was I have a writer friend who's fairly well known enough that, she could kind of do this. She asked ChatGPT to tell her about herself and her credentials. And she was shocked to find that it said she went to a university she did not attend, had degrees she did not have, and won awards that she never won. And that really makes you question, okay, should I really be using ChatGPT for research and verifying things? I don't think so. There's too many errors, too many ways for things to go wrong. Because Chat GPT, I don't think can be very well programmed to tell the truth. It can't always discern what's the truth and what's not the truth. It can't tell the difference between jokes and facts. You know what I mean? It's like, we'll tell a joke and we'll, or it, well, yeah, what it cannot tell whatsoever is it does not read subtext. It can't read subtext. So it takes everything on surface value, and that's all it can do. People can read subtext. That's great. We can read facial expressions and get an idea of what's going on underneath that. So, one of the big hangups a lot of people have, and rightly so, is that these large language models were trained on everything. That includes works that are copyright held, whose owners did not give permission to use for training. Also, I've read fairly recently that some well-known journalistic websites are pretty angry and have also started lawsuits about um, having their articles run through and trained that were behind paywalls. And, you look at that, you like, something that's behind a paywall should not be accessible to train your large language models. And if it's behind a paywall, that's a very clear marker of no, stay out. You're not welcome. You cannot use this material. So there are multiple lawsuits, and I'm gonna put a link in the chat for anybody that is interested in reading up about some of them and current statuses of them. Now, what about ownership? A lot of the time, we will create something amazing and we love it so much, we want to protect it. That is our natural instinct when we write something, when we draw something, when we create something, when we make a piece of music. We've made it and we want to protect it. Well, we can't exactly do that very well when using AI. In the US, ownership is currently not possible. You cannot copyright something that has been directly outputted by a computer. In order to copyright, you have to be the creator of it. So the Copyright Office says, and this is taken from their statement, and I'll put a lot of these links in the chat as well. They say that they begin by asking whether the work is basically one of human authorship with a computer or other device merely being an assisting instrument, or whether the traditional elements of authorship in the work were actually conceived and executed not by man, but by a machine. So they look and they say, if a machine generated the work, if you told a machine, give me a story about 3 pigs and a wolf. Of course, you wouldn't do that, it's already out there, but just an example. Give me 3 pigs, a wolf, and turtle doves. And it came up with a story, but you didn't put forth the effort to actually create the actual story. And the computer actually created the story, even though you told it kind of what to create. They look at that and they say, that's no different than you giving a description of what you want an artist to draw and another artist drawing it. You didn't draw the artwork, the artist drew the artwork. So they look and they say, copyrights can only be held by humans, not by inanimate objects, pretty much. There was a case where a gorilla took a picture and somebody tried to get it copyrighted, and the Copyright Office declined it, saying no, because a gorilla is not human. It could not be copyrighted. An interesting thing to note is that if you give the same prompt, 2 different people give the same prompt to a large language model thing, to an AI thing, and you give it the same parameters, you're most likely able to get the same or similar picture because you've used the exact same parameters. 2 different people have used the exact same parameters. And so both these people wouldn't be able to say, oh, you copied me, because, well, no, you both used a tool and the tool produced a similar thing. There was, back in 2022, a graphic novel. It's submitted to the Copyright Office. It was granted a copyright initially, but then later they learned that the images of the novel were generated by AI using Midjourney. So In February 2023, the Copyright Office changed the copyright so that it was only partial. It included copyright of the text, and it included a copyright for the selection and arrangement of the images as a whole piece of work, but it would not copyright the individual images because those were created by Midjourney. So what that means in the United States is that if you create something using AI, anybody has the right to use it, because anything created with AI pretty much becomes public domain. The person who wrote it, who wrote the prompt, the tool itself, and the authors of the tool do not own it. That's what the courts so far have declared. So anything created by AI is public domain. You like my picture back here? You could take it and use it, and I would have nothing to say about it because I used it. I created it out of AI. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to the public because everything that the AI uses was trained using public data, makes it public domain. Laws, however, could change over time. If you go to the European Union, their laws kind of are more, they're based on originality flowing from the author's own intellectual creation, which they widely interpret that to mean that it's from human output. And they argue that if a human puts in a significant amount of work with a machine, that perhaps it could constitute ownership. So far, that hasn't really been determined, but there is the possibility that AI products could potentially be copyrightable in the European Union. In the UK, they have a Copyright Designs and Patent Act of 1988 that extends copyright protection to computer-generated work. So AI product is copyrightable in the UK. And in China, it's kind of interesting. There were a couple of court cases that determined that specific intellectual processes were used in creating the outputs, crafting prompts from specific human preferences that the model would not have chosen on its own. So in the first case, the court declared that the owner of the output was the company because they were able to determine that some teams within that company had done the prompt work to create the product. So they declared ownership of the company. In the second case, the court declared that the prompt crafter or the user was the copyright holder because they put in the effort and made those specific choices within the computer to generate that product. So in China, AI product has already been copyrighted. So there's no one rule for the entire world. Different countries are trying to handle this in the best way they can and the way that they see it. They don't all agree, but that's okay. None of us all agree either, right? So the future, what does that mean? Well, most likely AI is not going away. It's going to be here in some form or another. We started out with having Furbies, and now we have electronic robots vacuuming our houses. So, it's going to be here. The question is, what are we going to do with it? We could, tuck our tails and run. We could use it a little bit. I don't know. Depends. Jane, in her article that I haven't put in chat yet, but I will, she kind of likens it to, well, there's a rainstorm coming, and you can look at the rainstorm and you can hide in your house and hover and cry, or you can go out, put your rain gear on and select crops that are going to thrive in that kind of weather. If you're a farmer kind of thing. But, it's kind of an interesting take. Now, some book companies, it's kind of funny, book companies will not take AI generated artwork or stories. But they are beginning to seek to license some of their books to train AI. And, I don't know how some authors will feel about that, but I don't know. It's worth considering that your life's work, while it's significant to you, is like a speck of sand in the Sahara Desert of large language models, right? They're huge to us, but it's a small piece of data in the huge mass amounts of data. And then, well, gee, what about if somebody takes your work or your book or your imageries were used to train AI and somebody specifically tries to create something in your style? Well, book theft was around before any of this AI. Now it's kind of raising the issue of style theft, right? So it's not just duplicating your actual words, but trying to duplicate your style, and that can feel very intrusive. Um, but something to consider. What's has often been attributed to Oscar Wilde, but was actually stated in entirety first by Charles Caleb Colton. Imitation is the sincerest of flattery. This is something that has been rampant in the fashion industry, and many have just been kind of fraught with how to stop it. But then some factions have leaned into it and have decided that if they have reached the point where somebody is copying them, then they have finally made it, so to speak, and they just move on and put out the next best thing. Um, it's, I think, a choice of how we want to respond to what is going to continue being in the world with AI. Um, if I have something that's unpleasant in my life, I can choose to fight the whole way, or I could choose to try and get through it the best way I can. I usually usually prefer to do it in a more peaceable fashion. I don't always, because sometimes I'm a little stubborn, but it's kind of the same thing with AI. Um, what's the best way to get through it? I don't know. Or are we just going to be stubborn and dig in and try and fight it the whole way and say, no, it was originally created um, on a bad basis with stolen material, and it's robbing people of jobs. Those things are true. Yeah. There are some upsides as well to it. Um, Companies like Shutterstock and Adobe, they're now asking permission from creatives to train their programs and are looking to pay them for it. That's also something that we can consider as authors. The more that companies are willing to be transparent and respectful of artists and are willing to pay them, we could consider that maybe the things that we write, things that we generate, we could perhaps earn an extra income from them in allowing AI to train their machines with our work. So it's something to think about. So, things to consider going forward: follow your conscience, but keep evaluating the data and laws as things progress, because things will change. It's okay if your stance changes. You don't have to feel guilty one way or the other if you decide to change how you feel, nor should we guilt other people about how they feel or if they change how they feel. If you use it, you still need to think for yourself. And if you don't think so, just look at autocorrect again and go, oh, yeah, because autocorrect is just a tiny picture of what the big thing does. The big thing does the same thing as well. Do not feed any sensitive and private data into AI ever. That is one big rule that you should have for yourself, because you do not want any of that sensitive information going out into the broad field in the public and being used by computers and manipulated. And golly, I can't imagine what could come from that, but it would not be good. No passwords, no addresses and all of that. No, not even, medical stuff. Don't put that in there. And out of courtesy, don't take somebody else's data, somebody else's sensitive information, and put that into a large language model. That's not even just out of courtesy, but that's mean, in my opinion, to do that, because you put somebody else at risk. So do not do that. That's not ethical at all. So my big word of caution there: don't do that. Always ask when using a tool what it does with your data. Some tools allow you to turn off learning so that it will not learn on the material that you use. seek that out if you can, if you don't like it. If you don't mind, go ahead. But be mindful that if you use it, it's likely learning from your data unless they have decided to turn off. But go check. Always review your terms of service and policy privacy when updates come along. And you want to review, it doesn't matter what program it is, using Microsoft Word or any other word. If there's a policy update, check it for any terms regarding AI technology, just to make sure you know what you're going to do. Adobe recently had this big uproar because they changed everything with their cloud service so that anything in the cloud would be used to train their large language models. People were livid, and many turned away from Adobe. So always check, always read. And last, before I address any questions, is not everyone feels the same about AI, and that's okay. So be kind to one another because, to borrow from 1 Corinthians 13, creation without love equals nothing. So we had a couple of questions.
No, well done, Brandy. While we go through the questions, that was a great overview of AI. Very, very good. Thank
There
you.
were a couple of, before we get any in the chat, there were a couple of questions that were in our Facebook members group that I would like
Oh,
to
okay.
address first. So one is, does the use of generative AI at any point during the production of artwork taint it for copyright purposes? And yes, it could be a problem, given what I mentioned, that you can't take AI generated material and copyright it. You can manipulate it. I'm not sure if the most of it, I don't know how much of it you have to manipulate in order for that individual piece of artwork to be copyrightable. If you take it and use it as a book cover and you put it with your book, then the whole book together could be copyrighted as a compilation, but that one particular image may not be, based upon that graphic novel that I mentioned earlier and what the Copyright Office did with that. So I would keep that in mind, that, you know, it could affect the image part of it. It should not affect the entire book, particularly if you wrote the entire book. But that leads to a follow-up question. Ditto for writing. Some of my tools will offer replacement alternative words of existing text, which seems to blur the line between generative and corrective. That does really fall in line with corrective AI, not generative AI. Even if it suggests phrase replacements, those are part of the correction that you can choose whether or not to implement. It's not like generating an entire section or an entire book. And then the question is, my understanding is Amazon does not want cover art that is AI generated, and that includes painting over an AI generated base picture. He didn't know if this was factual, but he had heard it recently from reliable news. Well, I went directly to Amazon, and what they say is they accept AI generated artwork, but you have to declare it as so. If you have a piece of artwork that was just enhanced or corrected or, you know, manipulated using AI, but it wasn't the actual generated image by AI, then you don't have to declare it as AI, because it's just like using Grammarly in writing, for instance. It just helps to clean up or change it or whatever, but you actually created the artwork and you just used assistive AI in helping to be its best self. So I hope that helps to clear it up. So yeah, you can use AI images for your covers in Amazon. So any other questions? And yes, I will put in all of my reference links too as I go, but I want to make sure I answer any questions in the chat.
We do. Do we want to invite people on to ask in
Yeah.
person if they'd like to?
Sure. And I will do my best to answer. Reality is I may not know the answer, but you can ask and we'll find out.
I think you covered this one, but this was the first question I saw in the chat. Are apps like Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly now using more generative rather than corrective? But I think you talked about that, but I just want to make sure we got it answered.
Yes, some of them are giving suggestions. And I haven't really looked closely at Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly because I don't use them. But they may have incorporated some other things, but those I think more generative. But yeah, there are many programs that are adding in elements that will help to generate ideas. I will say, AI is a really interesting tool to use to give you ideas that you can then springboard off of. So don't be afraid to use it for that if you don't have an ethical issue with the programs.
It can be kind of fun. So just last night, I was on Gemini, which is one I use, and I need a series title and wasn't coming up with anything. And all I did was put in the 3 titles of the books and said they were war stories, and the third one was after the war, but related to the whole family. I did not want to put in um, blurbs or tell too much about the story because of not wanting to give it all that information. And it actually came up with several pretty cool suggestions, and one of them I probably will go with. So it's just kind of interesting to play with it in those kinds of ways. You just have to be careful what you give it, I guess, is what I'm
Yeah. Well, it goes
saying.
back to the general good idea of
Mhm.
continue to think for yourself.
Yeah,
But yeah, it
yeah.
can prompt a lot of ideas because it sometimes we get stuck. And AI can be very useful for helping us to get unstuck.
I've used it to come up with names of a town that it's like, this will be a town in Florida, not the name of any current town, you know? And it did, and we
And then
played
you
with
go check
it.
to make sure it isn't a
Yes,
current.
you do, because it's
Yeah.
you gotta make sure, but, it gives suggestions, and so I kinda like these, what else you got along this line, or, and then it's really just sort of fun to play around with that way, just and that gets you over the fear of it too, I think, because a lot of times we just don't wanna do something because it's scary, but if you
Hmm.
just start having a conversation with it, it can just be fun. Okay, other questions? I
I
know that
had one
go
I
ahead.
had one earlier, and I'm not sure if, if I know all the details of it. Maybe some of you are more informed than I am and can clear the waters. But I had been curious, in where we discussed about research online and being careful of the AI models. I noticed a while back that Google's search engine announced that it was incorporating AI into it. And so then I was wondering, does that call into the question the use of search engines and whether they can be reliable or not, and what kind of AI they use, and how can you distinguish, or can you shut off certain features so that you're not intentionally searching crazy stuff? That was something that was a concern of mine.
Google has incorporated that. They've put kind of a summary of stuff of AI um, summaries of what the search found, but they have at least separated it from the rest of the search items so you can kind of skip past that and go to the search results if you want to. I'm not sure if you can turn it off, only because I typically don't use Google. Um, but I know that a lot of people are kind of annoyed by it more than anything, but you could still access the actual search results. So you don't have to worry about that. I have found AI summaries on Amazon's product review page rather helpful. Um, just to give an overview of what everybody seems to be saying, but I still read the reviews, you know. And then of course there's a whole other issue with, reviews not all being genuine anyway, but
That is kind of fun, though. I like to go to my books and see what the AI generative text says because it just sort of it's like, okay, what are people mostly saying about my books and what kind of writer am I and what can I use pull from that then for marketing, like
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So I think that's kind of fun.
I most appreciate, given the fact that how everything started out with AI, which is so wrong. They did like the big no-nos with the worst thing you could do in coming up with generative AI or any of that was to do what they did, train it on copyrighted material. That is probably the worst thing they could have done. And I think that they are like, oh, and the backlash that has come from that has really caused this industry to try and straighten itself up and start going in the right direction, to be open, honest, transparent, and train on acceptable material going forward. So no matter how it started, there has been a good shift, I think, in the right direction, which does make me feel at least a little bit better. It doesn't undo all of the bad that it did, but you know, it's kind of like once you say something, you can never get it back. It's feathers to the wind. You know, how long are you going to hold somebody accountable and against, you know, be against them for an infraction that, you know, they try to make it right. They're never going to be able to make it right. Um, you know, at some point, I think, especially as Christians, and it's important to forgive and move on and look at the trajectory now and what their aim and their purpose is now. You know, we forgive one another should we consider, if they're going in the right direction, they've repented, so to speak, beginning to go the right way, then should we not extend the same to them and not be so angry, maybe?
Catherine had a question too on here. Do AI image generators include embedded maker's marks, as you might see in for public use photo databases?
I have occasionally seen text, remnants of text come up in some of the image generations. Some people have used Midjourney and others to create like Disney characters. You cannot, I don't care what you come up with for image generation, you cannot take something that AI created, even if it's public domain. You cannot take Mickey Mouse or
Oh yeah,
Yoda.
don't need.
And
they will jump on you so hard.
yes,
and
you
so
cannot
fast.
take those images. You can't say, oh, well, I made this with AI. It's public domain. No, those characters are copyrighted. Those are defended with vengeance.
Yes,
Yep,
they are.
and they're trademarked. It's a
They're
trade.
trademarked. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. That was the right word. I did not get what I was looking
Vigor.
for.
It's defended with vigor.
Vigor. Yes. 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 And they will hunt down even the smallest infractions. So, if you end up generating copyrighted trademark material, you need to dump it. You didn't intend to. Sometimes the machines will come up with stuff they're not supposed to. Yeah.
Okay, Pam had a question on here too. How do you know if you're using, like Adobe uses AI? Do companies have to be upfront with that, or do you just have to search that out?
I think most of them are pretty upfront about what they use and what they don't use. In fact, a lot of them are kind of flamboyant about it. Yeah,
Just be careful. Kathy answered this too, and she's got a good line in here. Other companies have similar policies but didn't get caught. So, you know, you have to, yeah, just be careful.
Yeah. And there are some companies where they've been questioned, is this AI? And the companies have been like, no, this is an AI, but what they fail to, like, you know, there's one program that editors will use sometimes to help with, you know, catch things that maybe their eyes didn't catch.
Yeah.
And you know, they're like, you know, this is not AI. Well, yeah, actually it is. It's corrective AI, it's not generative AI, but they didn't recognize the own distinction. And so they misspoke and said that it wasn't AI when it was. So some people don't recognize the kinds of AI that there are between generative and non-generative. So that can sometimes be misconveyed from companies just because they perhaps lack understanding.
Brandy, you made a really good point about the fact that these AI cannot read subtext, can't read, and that is a huge thing.
Humor,
My son's
can't understand
humor, they don't understand humor. My son sent me something. He says, I think Google search has lost it. And it was something about somebody, he put it in because he heard about it, about what are the health benefits of smoking. And it had this long thing about how coaches encourage athletes to smoke. And he said my son said all he could figure was, you know, Reddit and some of those people would put in sarcastic remarks, and other people
Right.
would, you know, say thumbs up, and AI had no
Exactly.
clue that all those likes didn't mean that was true. It just meant
Right.
everybody thought it was funny.
Exactly.
I thought we have
Yeah.
to keep that in mind, that that's our huge advantage.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Exactly. Any other? Yeah, any, yeah.
Comments, questions? This was really, really interesting.
Mhm.
Brandy's been wanting to do an AI presentation for a bit, and we kind of just put it off for a while because it's been so controversial, but this was very well presented, and I appreciate all the research you've done to bring us very good information on it. This is wonderful.
Well, hopefully it's
sure.
helpful, and perhaps maybe some people that might have been really wary of corrective programs that use AI just because it labeled AI might recognize the difference, and think, okay, if they have an issue with using generative AI, maybe it'll be a little bit different for corrective. Those things that they're trained on are different, grammar rules, they're spelling rules, a lot different than being trained on um, all of our books and images, right? They have a smaller set of parameters for specific purposes.
Okay. Well, stay around for the after party, and if we can still talk about this or talk about other things. Melissa, what about next week?
Next week, we're going to have Jonathan Sugar come on to talk about top of the world publishing. And we heard him do a presentation at the Novel Marketing Conference. So it'll be fun to kind of get him on with and give a little more detail about this company and what it offers authors, and see if it's right for you. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun. So yeah.
Okay, so that'll be next week. And if you're watching the replay, we invite you to join our Facebook Writers Chat members group. If you haven't already done so, check out our Writers Chat page also on Facebook. You'll see all the videos that we've done that are on our YouTube channel, which is actually a playlist on the Serious Writer channel. Until then, we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.